Welcome to The Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, the editorial director at Choice. My guest for this episode is Eric Lease Morgan. Eric is Digital Initiatives Librarian at the Hesburgh Libraries at the University of Notre Dame, and we're going to take a look back over Eric's career, which is largely focused on digital librarianship. In many ways, Eric is the perfect person to talk about the evolution of library technology. After all, he was one of the first 10,000 people to create a website. He's also one of the earliest members of Code for Lib, a volunteer-run collective of technologists who work in libraries, archives, and museums. If you ask him, and I do, he'll tell you that his focus has always been about using technology to enhance the practice of librarianship. I should mention that we're recording this episode in partnership with Choice's LibTech Insights blog, which you can read at choice360.org/libtech-insights. LibTech Insights, or LTI for short, is Choice's blog channel that covers library technology. An interview with Eric, separate from this episode, is posted there. And now, on to my talk with Eric. Hi, Eric. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So why don't we start with well, it's all going to be about you, but let's talk a little bit about what you're currently doing. Can you just briefly tell us what your current research and work is all about?
My research and my work aren't necessarily the same thing. I have three responsibilities. I am expected to facilitate workshops about text mining and natural language processing. I'm expected to work collaboratively with faculty and graduate students on their various projects, and I spend another third of my time on a thing I call the distant reader, which is kind of like text. It's not kind of like, it's text mining and natural language processing and the whole 9 yards.
And that's part of your work?
All that's part of my work, yes.
Yeah. And then where does your research extend into?
Well, again, that's the third part, the distant reader.
Oh, okay.
I'm spending time building collections, organizing them, modeling them, archiving them for the long haul, and providing ways to disseminate them back out again. All of this is for the purposes of saving the time of the reader. Mm-hmm. That increasingly we are expected to read more and more and more and more and more. But it's very difficult to read these sorts of things. It takes a very long time. And I think that we can use computers to supplement that reading process. And that's what my research is about. And I call it the distant reader.
Nice. So the collections you mentioned, are these in any particular subject area or discipline?
They are mostly in the liberal arts.
Okay.
So a lot of it is American and English literature. I got a grant from Microsoft during the pandemic to do this sort of thing against 1 million journal articles about COVID. Very exciting. So my collection includes that. It also includes about 0.4 million journal articles, scholarly journal articles that I found all over the web. So my collection right now is about 0.7 million items. E-texts and articles about all sorts of things, but mostly leaning towards the liberal arts.
Okay. So it sounds like there's you're applying sort of a curatorial layer to this and which is what helps readers kind of zero in on what they need to read? Or?
Yes and no. Okay. I created the collection to demonstrate how the thing called the distant reader works. The real idea is that no one really cares about my collection of 0.7 million items. They want to read their own stuff. And so, but I've created various tools to demonstrate how to use the reader, but with the big expectation that someone will bring their own content and apply the process to their own content. Say, for example, a person does a search against JSTOR, and they search for climate change. Right. And let's suppose that they've done the perfect search. And they've identified 250 articles that are just exactly what they're looking for. Well, let's ignore the fact that it's very difficult to click save, click save, click save, click save, click save, click save 250 times. But let's suppose they were to get the 250 articles that are all perfect and right on their search strategy. The reader can help them read those 250 articles. It can answer all sorts of questions like, what are various topics in this collection of literature? How have those topics changed over time? How have those topics changed over place? What are the big themes? Oh, I'm very interested in this particular idea. Extract all the sentences that contain this word, this word, this word, and this word so I can do close reading against just those things. That's the big idea behind the reader, sort of, mostly.
So that sounds kind of familiar these days. I mean, what's the underlying technology there? Like, how are you able to tell it to extract these types of things?
There's a whole pile of different technologies, and all of them are types of modeling. All of them are different types of modeling. The first task is to simply collect the original content, and that can be in any flavor, shape, or form. PDF documents, Word documents, email messages, CSV files, the content from a longitudinal study files. The next step is to extract the plain text from all those files. Okay, can't do natural language processing against a PDF document. You just use get the plain text. And then after I have the plain text, then I extract all sorts of features. Parts of speech. I know every single word in every single document, where it's located in the document, and what part of speech it is, a noun, a verb, an adjective. Then I extract what's called named entities. These are people, places, things, dates, times, money amounts, works of art, maybe diseases, chemicals, great big long list of those things. I can pull out all the URLs in all the documents, all the email addresses in all the documents, and then I can compute statistically significant keywords. These are like subject headings. And I can also compute summaries of each and every document. And then I can also compute what are called extents. In library land, we catalog things as 5 XVI 27P call ill. Okay, that's the extent. But in a digital world, that doesn't matter. And so I want to know how many words are in this document. How difficult is this document to read? How many sentences is this document? Those are extents. So I extract parts of speech, named entities, email addresses, all those extents, the summaries, all that sort of good stuff. And then based on this information, I can begin to show you what themes exist in the text, how those themes have changed over time, what the style is of the particular writing. Are these things centered around the Middle Ages or modern day? And I use a program called Tika to extract the plain text. I use a Python library called Spacey to extract many of the features. I use a topic modeling tool called Mallet to do topic modeling. I use another technique called semantic indexing to find out what words are related to other words. It supports full text searching. It supports concordancing. It supports the creation of linked data over every single file in this thing, so I can put it on the web and find new connections. So the technology there's many technology. But there's one thing that's very important. All the technology can be run on any computer. You can have a Macintosh and run this. You can have a Windows computer and run this. You can have a Linux computer and you can run this. You can run this on a supercomputer, or you can run it on your Raspberry Pi. And there's one more thing that's very important. All the things that are created are not software specific. And they will be, I could do my analysis on computers of 20 years ago, and I will be able to do my analysis on computers 20 years into the future. I'm a librarian. I want to create things for the long haul.
Yeah. All right.
That's a very long answer.
Well, that's great. Thank you for all that detail. So the prompts you were explaining, in terms of asking questions about the content. I mean, this is reminding me a lot of what AI is currently doing or allowing people to do when they're querying documents or repositories of content.
Mm-hmm.
Is Does that sound correct, or is there a parallel there?
It's funny that you mentioned that. About how long ago was it that the company OpenAI brought out ChatGTP?
Yeah, right.
How long ago was that? A couple of years?
Yeah.
Well, after that happened, a lot of people came up to me and they said, "Isn't that what you're doing, Eric?" And I was doing it with different sets of technology.
Yeah.
But now I am also supplementing these data sets that I'm creating with AI technology. It's all part of different modeling processes. I say take the same content and I make different models of the content, different views of the content. And we could do this in a digital environment, and it wasn't really possible in an analog one.
Okay, awesome. So you've been exploring, ways technology can be used in a library setting for a lot of your career. I'm wondering if you could take us through that arc, describe that arc of sort of the evolution of technology over your career. Looking back, were there any key milestones for you?
Well, I can enumerate a few.
Okay.
Let's see here. Let me think. I'll just stick with my in my profession. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was a medical librarian. No, I'll go back one more step. I worked in interlibrary loan, and I was lending.
Okay.
And my boss said to me, "Eric, you're gonna have to do an annual report." And I go, "What does that mean?"
Oh boy.
She says, "You're going to have to count and tabulate all those little pieces of paper." And I go, "I hate counting and tabulating little pieces of paper." So I wrote a computer program that generated my annual report daily. That was very helpful. And I go, "Oh, wow, this computer thing works pretty well." and then I became a medical librarian, and I was supposed to drive around from hospital to hospital to hospital in rural South Carolina, providing library services. And they didn't know what books I owned in my little library. So I wrote a little computer program that was a portable online catalog. The whole catalog, the software, the data, everything was on a disk. And I could give the disk away. Mm-hmm. And I won an award from Computers and Libraries for that particular hack. That was a lot of fun.
Nice.
And then a little bit later on, Apple Computer comes along and they say, "If you could have a computer, what would you do with it?" And that was the best 2 pages of text I ever wrote in my whole life, because they sent me computers and they sent me software and they sent me more computers and they sent me some more software. And then they flew me out to Apple Computer and I drove around from hospital to hospital to hospital providing library services. And I wrote a computer program I called Ask Eric. And this was an expert system. It would ask you questions, you would answer the questions, and based on the answers, it would do other questions. And in the end, it would search Medline, a National Library of Medicine's online catalog. And it would search and then bring back the results and make a list. And then you would check off the ones you wanted and click another button, and they would get ordered from you. And then they'd come back and you'd get the things in 2 weeks. But that was in 1991. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that was called an expert system. That was pretty cool. And then I moved to North Carolina State, and I heard about this scholarly communications crisis, serials pricing crisis, and how the prices of journals were going through the roof. And I decided, I'll show them. I'll collect electronic journals and show how Library Suite can do that. And so I created this thing called the Mr. Serials process. And I collected all sorts of electronic journals. They came in the mail, and I indexed them, I gophered them, and I wased them, and I indexed them, and then I made web services out of them. And then I got a little reward from ALA for that project, which was kind of fun. And then a little bit after that, a man from Oxford says, "Eric, I see that you're doing cool stuff on the web. I have this catalog. I call it the Alex Catalog. Oh, and it's a collection of all sorts of great books." I go, "Oh, here, why don't you have it?" And I said, "Okay, great." And so
People are just giving you things, Eric.
And then he gave that to me. And I hacked on that for a while, and that's been running now for about 27 years, and I haven't touched it in 27 years. It hasn't crashed. It outputs the correct data. It does what it's supposed to do. It gets used. And that was a pretty cool deal.
Wow.
My Alex catalog. And then a little bit later on, I wrote another system that we called My Library. And the idea is that you would log in, come to a website, you would log in, you would say, I'm a freshman in English, and then we would recommend things for your page. And then your web page would get populated. And here's your librarian, and here's your resources, and you can add and subtract to them as you want to. And as your personal customized page. And that was in 1996. That was pretty cool. Database-driven website.
That sounds like a pre LibGuide type of thing.
Definitely, it was LibGuide is exactly the same thing as My Library.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, now I'm playing with, for the past 5 or 6 years, I've been playing with the thing that I call my distant reader, which collects stuff, makes data sets out of it, and then you compute against the data sets. So I built collections, I've archived things, I've cataloged things in the traditional manner, in the non-traditional manner. I provide services against them. I archive them for the long haul, and it's very satisfying to provide services on a one-on-one, but it's also very satisfying that I provide services to people all over the world for free.
Yes, there you go. Key word. So that's awesome, Eric. I'm wondering if I could get your thoughts on sort of, can all this, do you think this, I mean, you're obviously working on Distant Reader, but I mean, in general, in librarianship today, do you see the same opportunity for that kind of innovation among librarians? Or have, the various technology companies kind of caught up? Because it sounds like back in the day, you were very much, they were looking to you for some innovative ideas, or helping you, or wanting you to help them spread the gospel of technology. And I don't really see so much of that going on anymore. Is that fair?
That's astute. There is less of that going on now than there was, say, I'm going to go with 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But there's still just as much opportunity as there was. I think that it's a combination of things that are working against us. Let me think here. Hold on. I'm going to prioritize them. Many of the things that libraries have done traditionally are not as important as they used to be. Now, I didn't say they weren't important. Hear that? I didn't say they weren't important. They're not as important. We don't need the reference librarian as much as we used to. We can speak into our telephone or our computer, and we will probably get a decent answer. We don't need the library to be a storehouse of all sorts of content. We can probably find a lot of it out there on the net. And so we have to ask ourselves, what do we do differently in order to stay relevant? And I think the answer is more than here, come to our library, find bunches of books, and now you can check them out, and I did my job.
Right.
No. I think that it should be, here's bunches of books, and now I will help you understand what are in the books. I will help you read the books. And then another thing that we're shooting ourselves in the foot with is licensing. I am unable to do analysis against texts unless I have the text. I can't have 250 links. That's like giving me 250 call numbers and telling me to summarize this genre of American literature. No, I need the content.
Yeah.
And we've signed away our privilege to get the content. And so that's working against us. And if, on the other hand, there's a whole lot of open access content that is scholarly, and that is the same, duplicates the stuff that's in our traditional library collections. If we were to actually have that data, then we could provide services like My Reader to analyze the content and save the time of the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have to enable people to play. You have to encourage them. We encourage you to play. In fact, I don't want to see your successes. I want to see how many failures you had to demonstrate that you've done exploration. It's not about keeping the trains running. It's about exploring new ways to do old things.
Well said, Eric. I wonder how that might apply. I know every library is unique and every institution has its own priorities. But what are some of the ways that what you've just talked about can be sort of advocated for or supported in an academic library where, folks have the opportunity to do that experimentation or have the time, importantly, to do that because, not even anecdotally, but the data is there that, positions are, folks are being asked to do so much with very little. And, what, in your view, like, how can a library support that kind of experimentation and innovation?
The people at the top and the middle managers first have to prioritize the time of the workers.
Mm-hmm.
And that priority has to say, I expect you to do some R&D. I expect you to do some playing. You are authorized every Friday afternoon to not catalog those books, but learn how to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if the pile of books is getting bigger. You can, because your work will find out ways to make that pile get smaller later.
Mm-hmm.
You spend time and energy every Friday afternoon learning how to do better and different cataloging, you'll catch up real fast. So the first step is that administration must prioritize and actively say, you are allowed and I expect you to play.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is take your existing content. You've all got some. Digitize it. Describe it with author titles and dates. You get extra credit for things like subjects and extents. And then you digitize the content, and then you do analysis against it. Go beyond bibliographic description and pull out parts of speech, pull out named entities, feed it to make it full text indexable. And then after you've done your own content, go and harvest content from the net, stuff that's open access. For example, acquisitions librarians are about bringing content into the library. Great.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean I pay bills and I go to that vendor. That's one way to acquire content. But another way to acquire content is to use protocols called OAI PMH and harvest it from the net and bring it locally and then catalog it and then put it on your disk and then provide services against it. So prioritize, digitize your own content and play with it, harvest stuff from the internet and play with it, harvest stuff from your own institution and play with it. Repeat. It's a never-ending process.
Right. Excellent. All right, so I'd like to talk a little bit about AI. It's something we bring up quite a bit on this podcast. So Eric, can you just give us your sense of how that technology has evolved in higher education and, especially today?
AI has come and gone in the history of computing. Computing sort of starts in 1945 and it adds real fast. And we go, wow, that's really smart. And then later on, a cool little program called Elijah comes out and it asks you questions and you discuss with the thing, but it just echoes back what you said. Mm-hmm. And then expert systems were the big thing. And they came and went. They were hard to develop. Nowadays, we have a different flavor of AI, and we call it machine learning. And basically, it's a giant word predictor. And it works, and it does what it's supposed to do. And it works like fill in your phone only on steroids, which is
Right.
great. But this time, unlike the previous times, I think AI will stick around because we all have computers in our pockets.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it will stick around. And this is the first time in my career that I feel a little bit threatened by the technology because it can write software and it can answer questions. So that's a lot what I do for a living. On the other hand, it's important for all of us to understand that it requires an additional type of information literacy. Don't take what the AI says as truth.
Mm-hmm.
Take it as a suggestion or a possibility, but it's not necessarily true. Just because it's in black and white and it's written down doesn't mean it's true. Just because some sort of artificial intelligence, machine learning thing created it doesn't mean it's true. And there's lots of opportunities for AI in libraries. Now, there's only 3 things you can really do. You can make a model, but that requires a computer the size of Walmart.
Yeah.
And libraries don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
You can fine tune a model, and that takes a computer a little bit smaller than the size of Walmart. But the coolest thing we can do is what's called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. And it works a lot like our indexing. You have content, you index it, vectorize it, save it. You ask it a question, you vectorize your question. The vector of your question is compared to the vectors of your indexed content. It finds 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, 12 of them. It finds those most relevant articles and it combines them with a large language model to formulate an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very effective. And it can be a supplement to lots of our other processes. And lastly, I believe that we really want to do this in library land. We need to do more collaboratively. We can't afford the computers as our own. But if you afford consortiums and we all pool our money together, we can have access to the big computer that's the size of Walmart and index our own content. And we can get rid of all that stuff about the bias and the copyright and all those other sorts of things because it's ours.
Right.
There's lots of opportunities there.
So does that make you feel less threatened about the technology?
Yes, I'm trying to stay ahead of the game.
Good. Great. I have to say that was probably the best definition of RAG that I've heard in a while. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
So you've mentioned that in the profile that our blog did with you, that finding things is not a problem. It's managing and prioritizing the massive amounts of what we find.
Yes.
Can you talk about that comment and what that means?
Again, I don't believe that find is the problem to solve. I can find bunches. We can all find bunches of stuff. The problem is twofold. Getting it is difficult to get. I find 250 links on the internet. How can I download that stuff? They're all perfect. That's one part. Getting the content is part. That will be overcome. The next problem will be I found 250 things. They are all exactly what I need. Which one do I read first?
Right.
Which ones do I read first? How do I divide this big pile into more manageable chunks? I can find plenty. I need to help me figure out how to prioritize the content so I can do both distant reading and close reading so I get my brain around these massive pile of articles or books.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's tapping into the service orientation now. I
guess.
Yes.
I like to think I do it all: services and collections and cataloging and preservation.
Fantastic. So I do want to talk about a little bit Code for Lib, codeforlib.org. It's an organization that you were one of or the founder of, if I have that correct.
Well, founder is a strong word, but I've had the longest role.
Okay.
And I pulled up my piece of paper, I pulled up my archives, and on my birthday in November of 2003,
yep.
These 4 guys, Ed Summers, Rob Fox, Chuck Bearden, and Dan Chutnoff, they came to me and they said, Eric, I think we need a mailing list. And I think the mailing list should be called Code for Lib. And I think that we should be able to have discussions about computers and libraries. oh, okay, great. And we think you could do this. I go, oh, okay, great. And so I created a mailing list, and I've been sort of more or less moderator, but it's very loosely moderated for the past 20 years. And over time, the mailing list has grown. And so now there's about 3,900 subscribers. They're from all over the world, but mostly the United States. And the community has grown. So now we have a referee journal that comes out about 3 or 4 times a year. We have an annual conference that happens once a year. There's a wiki, there's a Slack channel, and there are even Code for Lib franchises. There's Code for Lib Southeast, there's Code for Lib New York, there's Code for Lib Midwest, there's Code for Lib Paris. And people get together and talk about computers and libraries. And I'm not, and there is no president, there is no formal organization. I don't think we have 501(c)(3) LMNOP nonprofit status,
Right.
but it is it's a community that continues to grow, and I've sort of less moderated the thing since day one.
That's excellent. So, do those regional groups get together in person?
Yes, they
Nice.
get together in person, and they discuss computers and libraries.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the sort of content that gets generated from this loose organization, I mean, is it just kind of folks publish stuff as it occurs to them, or is it a little more organized than that?
Well, there's very little organization. the the mailing list is usually a combination of announcements of jobs or interesting projects, or sometimes they'll say, I have such and such and so a computer problem. Can you help me? And then there might be discussions. Sometimes there's philosophic discussions like what is open source software and when should you do open source software versus something else. The Slack channel is much more immediate. People have little smaller problems, and that there are, you missed a comma. And those are the sorts of solutions. And in the annual conference, it's a lot about, this is how I did good. This was the problem I had at my particular institution, and this is how I solved that problem. And every year the conference gets sold out, and again, it's been going on for the better part of 20 years, and it's a helpful, useful community.
Right. Well, that's fantastic. So you mentioned something in your profile with our blog LTI that you were one of the first 10,000 people in the world to create a website while you were at NC State.
That's true.
Now, I can remember when Google launched, it had a running ticker of the websites that it actually indexed, and it would count day to day, like over 1 million websites crawled or whatever it said. I remember it's right under the search box. I think it said it. How did you know you were one of the first 10,000?
Well, okay. What happened was, is I made my little website. It was ugly as sin. It was a lot of fun though. And
when
I think
was
what
this?
happened
I'm
was
sorry.
that
When was this?
When was this? This was probably 1994 or 1995. Okay. And I think what happened is that CERN, the folks who more or less articulated the HTTP protocol, did some sort of cool crawling thing. And they said, there are 10,000. I've already did mine. I'm one of the first 10,000.
Nice. Perfect timing. That's excellent. All right. Well, Eric, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I enjoy sharing my experience.
You just heard from Eric Lease Morgan, Digital Initiatives Librarian at the Hesburgh Libraries at the University of Notre Dame. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this month. Thanks for joining us.